Hi, and welcome to this Affinity Creative session. My name is Fernando Martins Ribeiro, and I'm a product photographer based in Lisbon, Portugal. My background is in architecture, where I've worked for almost 20 years before becoming a full-time product photographer. I've been using Affinity Photo for my post-production work for more than 5 years now, and about a year ago I've started to incorporate Affinity Designer and Affinity Publisher in my workflow. In this brief video, I would like to explain you what is the Shadow Overlays package, why I have created it, and show you a few practical examples of its use. So, the Shadow Overlays package is a series of images of real shadows ready to be placed on any image when you want to add a feeling of natural light. They were created so that I could add interest to plain background images like backshots, or to completely change the mood of an entire image. These images are provided as an assets file for easy drag and drop. And after buying the package from the Affinity Store, you can download the assets file and simply drag and drop it on Affinity Photo to have it ready for use. So let me show you how simple it is. First, to make the assets panel visible, go to the View, then Studio, and then Assets. Now, just drag and drop the Shadow Overlay Assets file, and after a couple of seconds you should start seeing the rendering of the thumbnails, and then you're ready to go. And that's it. This simple. The assets are 8-bit sRGB images with a multiply blend mode applied to them, and in most situations this will be the best blend mode to use. Other blend modes are also useful depending on the effect you want to achieve. The assets are organized into major groups and 4 types in each group. Geometry, shades, walls, and flora are all images created to be used in flat surfaces like walls, tabletops, or floors. Perspective images were captured in the intersection between wall and floor and allow you to use them when you have 2 surfaces and you want the shadow to naturally cross both surfaces. Going to a bit more of detail, geometry images were created using geometrical elements. These provide a very strong and very graphical background. The shade images recreate the effect of sun going through a window or a ceiling with beams casting shadows on walls and floors. The Flora overlays use natural elements to add an outdoor feeling to your images. They're also really good to combine with other shades or geometries and create new shadows. And finally, the walls are bright surfaces with strong shadows from opaque elements. These are also great to combine between themselves and into new shadows. So let's start with a really simple example. In this image, we have a typical flat-lay stationary presentation. These type of images are very common and very popular among graphic designers because they allow you to show a set of different elements working together. And usually you start with a very clean background and the elements there. And that is just to be able to present to the client. But if you want to add an extra something, for example, for a social network, you can just, very simple, drag an overlay shadow and place it on your image. You can adjust, you can stretch it, skew it, rotate, you can do whatever you want to the shadow, as long as it fits properly with your image. And then the most simple, the most basic thing you can do is just go to the opacity and, just control the opacity until it fits the look, the feeling, and your image. And that's it. There's nothing simpler than that. This image is very similar to the previous example, except the background has a strong and saturated color, although a light color. I would like to use this image to show you what happens when you put a dark shadow on top of a strong color, and how you can improve the result by bringing some color to the shadow. So let's grab here one shadow to put on our image, and what you'll notice is that the shadow it's quite grayish. It doesn't really pick any color from the background, and that's because we're affecting the background completely, and we just want to affect the luminosity, not color, and color is hue and saturation. So we're going to try to leave the color as it is, but we want to change the luminosity. To do that, we'll get our overlay and change the blend mode to luminosity. You'll notice that we have a problem, which is where our overlay is quite bright, it destroys completely the image below. To control that, we're going to use the blend ranges. And what I'm going to do is say, with this point, and this represents a 255, completely white, I'm going to say where my overlay is completely white, you're going to make it transparent. And where it's black, it will be completely opaque and affecting the image below. And let's just make the shadows a little bit more opaque, as you can see. You'll notice that we have a problem in the dark elements on our base image. And to control that, we're going to use the other side of the blend options. And that basically, we're going to get this point, and we're now referring to this image, and say if our underlying image has black, you will not affect it. And we just adjust this until we're happy with the result. And so we have this shadow that picks some color from the background and makes it a bit more natural than just having a completely gray shadow overlaying our image. This time I'm going to use a fairly typical pack shot. These are very common on e-commerce, and the thing about pack shots is that they don't have any idea of space or ambient to it, but you can use them as a starting point to create something more interesting. And that's where the perspective images come into play, because they give you a sense of space. It's not something that's happening in a background. They really give you that idea that this was placed in a space that had a floor and have a wall. And for this example, I'm going to use this one. This one works really well. So we have our overlay and we have our background, and we have a problem, which is the shadow is on top of the soaps, and so we need to cut out the soaps and separate them from the background. That way gives us more control over whatever happens to the background and whatever happens to our soaps. And to do that, we're gonna duplicate the background layer, gonna rename main, and gonna move on top with a quick selection and a refine. We should be able to get a good mask. Okay, so this is our soaps, this layer is our soaps, this is our shadow overlay and the background. Now I feel like the shadow is quite dark and I would like the shadow to be lighter. And to do that, we just go to the opacity and reduce it. But when we reduce, we lose that edge between vertical and horizontal, and I want to keep that. There's a couple of ways we can do this, and I would like to show you one way that I use very often, which is non-destructive, and you may not know it and could be really handy. So we're gonna duplicate, and the first layer we're gonna use to mask the area that we want, specifically that line. And to do that, I'm gonna just use a line and use the stroke. Let's put the stroke. Yeah, 300 seems a good number. And if you use this curve as a mask, let me just hide this for a moment. This is the result that we have. Now, it's not a very good result, as you can see. We need to fade out the edges. But to keep this editable so that we don't need to redo the work if we later on decide that we need to adjust something, let's push it outside. We get the curve and go to the layer effects panel. And here we're going to use the Gaussian blur. And yep, a bit more, let's say 100, yeah, 130 works well in this situation. Remember, this value will depend on the definition of your image. If you work in an image with 10,000 pixels wide, you're gonna need to work with higher values. If you work with an image that has only 3,000 pixels wide, the values you need are a lot smaller. And okay, so let me show you what it looks like. Let's extend it a little bit so that we don't have edge problem. And then we're gonna use this as a mask. And that's, without and with this selection. And now I can reduce, let's say, to 50%. And although the shadow is quite soft, it is interesting because we still have this edge. We can always reduce the effect if you want and keep it like that. And our main soaps. Now, let's give some color to the background. And again, I'm going to show you two ways we can do this. The first one is simply with a new fill layer. And we're going to use one of the soaps as a reference for this color and change it to color. Yeah. And so this is quite strong, so let's reduce it, but it's affecting, it's basically affecting everything in the image. And if I want to affect only the shadows, because the planes are receiving light, so they should be brighter, not that yellow. As I've shown you previously, we go to the blend options and say, in this case, I'm going to say, do not affect if my background is white or whatever it's white on my background. And this way we can have a really soft effect on the background. Again, this is quite powerful to go to the blend ranges and work that way. The second way you can do this is going here to the lens filter And in the lens filter, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. That is, we're going to go and choose the color of the soap. Make it quite dense. And again, go to the... This time I'm going to use a fairly typical pack shot. These are very common on e-commerce. And the thing about pack shots is that they don't have any idea of space or ambient to it. But you can use them as a starting point to create something more interesting. And that's where the perspective images come into play, because they give you a sense of space. It's not something that's happening in a background. They really give you that idea that this was placed in a space that had a floor and have a wall. And for this example, I'm going to use, it can be a new shadow, and you can just group them and then change the group blend mode to multiply and control opacity. And this is a really simple way for you to have new shadows based on the individual shadows of the package. Let's have a look at another example. This time I want to combine a wall, and this could be a wall with a window where light is, sunlight is coming through, and I want to combine that with some shades. To do that, I already have here the wall 5. I'm just gonna place the shades, and there's two things that we need to do. First, we need to have the shades in a light gray, as we have the wall, and we also need the shades to be visible only in the area where sunlight is coming through. So let's start first with correcting the gray, and for that I'm going to use 2 points. I'll be placing one here, and that's basically going to give me the shades. And I'm going to place a second one, which will be the wall. Oh, a little bit higher. And what I'm looking here is the L value, that's luminosity. I want to have a match between both of them. Specifically, I need the 27, which is the shades, to go up to 42. So if I go here, and it's a bit too much. Okay, both are 43, although they don't look the same. We'll see the result in a couple of seconds. And now we'll correct the second thing, which is to have the shades coming through only on the white areas of my image. To do that, I go to blend options. I'm going to use the underlying composition range, which is my wall, and say whatever it's black or gray, you will not pass through. And then you can fine tune a little bit more. Yeah. And that's another way you can create new shadows for your work. I've created a simple sketch to simulate an image, and I'm going to change several overlays to fit this perspective. Starting with wall 10, the easiest way is just to flip horizontal and then choose one edge, for example this edge, to match where both images have a matching point, and then just skew to match the horizontal line. If now you need more space, a simple way is just to hold the command key on a Mac and then stretch your image. Then you have to reskew it a little bit just to have a bit more space. Now let's try something else. Yeah, this one. Same problem here. They don't. The direction is different, and if we do this, well, it's too skewed. So let's start by flipping horizontal. Adjust the image, and this time I'm going to do something slightly different. So let's rasterize. I'm going to move the midpoint of my line to the midpoint of my perspective of my sketch. This will show me the center point from where I will transform. So this is the transform origin. That means when I stretch the image, I'll be using the command key. It will stretch from that point. That point will be stable. And this time, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Stretching the image, then skew, and skew. Okay. Okay, now a different one. Let's flip horizontal, and now I'm going to show you something else that you can do. And let's say we match these 2 points here, and I'm going to use perspective, and perspective will also allow me to match these 2 points. If I need more of the image on top, I can always stretch there and stretch here. And then remember that this will depend. You will stretch the overlay as much as you need to fit your final image. And these are just a few ways you can manipulate the overlays to fit the perspective of your image. I hope this session has been helpful to you, and thank you for bearing with me till the end.